Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Bumpin' Run podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chaffe. Alongside me is Andrew Wisdom, and we're going to talk about everything NASCAR in this podcast series. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about. This is the week of February 11th, 2019. And interesting stuff to talk about after the clash at Daytona, as well as Daytona qualifying, and much more on our lineup. So without further ado, let's get started with the clash. So Andrew, how'd you feel about that clash race?
That was the worst plate race I've ever seen in my life. No, I'm joking. I think there's a lot of people kind of you look at things like Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media you want to look at. Obviously, there were a lot of complaints about the finish, a lot of complaints about the side-by-side, or the lack of side-by-side racing, kind of the single-file train around the top. If you think about it from a driver's perspective, there's really no incentive to race as hard as you can for the first 40 laps of that race. So while it makes it extremely boring, really the only thing they could do is make it even shorter than it already is. I don't really think anybody's just going to start going crazy for the sake of making it entertaining, because they're just trying to get the check at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a lot of people looked over the fact that the Clash was a non-points paying race. It's just an exhibition race, and the only thing you could win is $1 million or something if you won the event. You're not going to lose anything for doing what you do out there on track. Which brings me to another good point, because, it seemed like people just kind of rode around, single file. A lot of people complained about the side-by-side racing, but it seemed like if someone were to try to pull out a line, keep in mind, so for those who maybe didn't watch the Clash or whatever, most of the racing was along the high side, and that's where most of the momentum was found. Now, we've seen plate races before where drivers would just be on the bottom line. They'd stay on the bottom and just hug the double yellow, but it seems like in recent years with this current super speedway package that drivers like to use the high line because you get more momentum off the banking and whatnot. And once you get a train of cars out there on the high side, they're gone. So I think a lot of drivers were experimenting. I can't think of anyone in particular, but I know guys like Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, kind of those guys that tried to make moves to the bottom. I think Harvick tried to do stuff, but he wound up just staying towards the back with Almirola. And then you had guys later on in the race like Joey Logano, who was able to get such a huge run thanks to help from Ryan Blaney and a few other Fords. But it's kind of tough with the package, I think, to run side by side. Like you said, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean,
yeah, from an entertainment perspective, it's just kind of boring, but one thing I'd like to know, and I don't know if anybody asked them or not, but I'd like to know with guys like Chase Elliott and Eric Jones, and obviously it was working out a little bit better for Daniel Suarez, but some of these guys that dove to the bottom in the early stages of the race, I'd like to know if they were doing it to try to get something started, or if some of them were just jumping to the bottom so that they could fall to the back. Because it seemed like Chase would ride around the high side, 18th, 19th, 20th, move up to about 12th or 13th kind of in line, and a couple others were doing the same thing. And then as soon as they got up there, he just dropped to the bottom and faded to the back and then hopped back in line. So I don't really know if they were doing that just to try to stay out of trouble, or if they were just trying to get something started and it never really worked out.
Yeah, it was tough because I saw a lot of guys like Harvick and Almirola who rode around 19th, 20th, which in this case was last place for the field because only 20 cars made this event, or who are eligible from our current driver lineup. And I was surprised with them just kind of staying and riding around the back. I was thinking, they try to get aggressive, they try to make a line form up on the bottom. But I'm curious too. I haven't really seen much on social media as to whether or not what they were thinking, but that, I agree with you. That'd be cool if we knew what they were doing. I think the safest bet is that they most likely tried to pull out of line to make the bottom work, to see if people would try to make runs. Obviously it didn't happen because a lot of them did just go to the back. So So yeah, we'll talk about that later on in this podcast, though, about a topic I want to talk about is what is good racing, what defines racing. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. But continuing on with the Clash, biggest thing as well was the rain delays. We had a total of 3 rain delays. The first one came out after lap 9. Second one was another 10 or so minutes into the Clash, and then we had our third one, the final one before obviously the big wreck happened. And I noticed that Bob Pockras, who is now on the Fox Sports team, which is really cool, he tweeted, he was replying to somebody on Twitter talking about why NASCAR did not decide to try to finish the Clash. Now keep in mind that the 4th rain delay came out, it was around 5 o'clock-ish, 5:30, and they were maybe 20 to go about. And so a lot of people were like, well, they were able to drive the track before then, why didn't they just try to get through this 4th rain delay and make it through. Bob Pockras made an interesting point. He said, but if there's a little chance to get restarted and the fans made plans expecting to leave by 5 or 6 p.m., thinking they'd hold them a couple extra hours for an exhibition race, doesn't seem like the best plan in his honest opinion, not to mention the crowd appeared to be thin. And I have to agree with them too. I mean, it downpoured a ton on that 4th rain delay. And I don't think anybody, especially for not necessarily how bad the racing was, but there was barely anyone else left. I think we could have had 12 cars at the most. Even that sounds like a lot, but maybe 12 cars at the most that would continue on the race. There were a handful of guys like Alex Bowman, Eric Almirola, Jamie McMurray. There's some guys that got little damage that could have continued on, but it would have been a very boring race.
So I was keeping an eye on the young guns there at the end, and I know that Chase Elliott was in, I think, P6, and Ryan Blaney was P5. And I know that Chase did have damage. It was repairable. The crew was working on it. I think they would have got him back out. But I would say if you think about probably the odds that everybody from the 9 on back probably had some form of damage, there was literally 5 cars left that would have been exactly how they rolled it off of the hauler. So I don't know how badly the damaged cars I don't know how badly the damaged cars would have dropped back, or if they would have been able to keep with the front 5 or so. But trying to just, I don't know, the crowd did seem thin. I don't know if it was because of the weather, if it was because people are just kind of losing interest. And some of it, people have been losing interest in NASCAR as a sport overall the last few years. I think that, we'll talk about this later on, but coming out with something like the Gen 7 here, I think they said they're trying to get that on track by 2021. So I think gaining more partners, getting a new generation of car, that'll help them in the future. But obviously, there's been a lot of complaints about NASCAR the last few years. So I don't know if it's just about fan interest or if it was about the weather, but it is just a preseason race. So I wouldn't be too terribly worried about the crowd. Just kind of need to see who shows up for the 500 next week as far as that goes. Yeah,
it's nothing special at all. And the 500 is the biggest event, and I think that's what more people want to watch. And, it's interesting too because, there's a lot of people that I've seen on social media and I've seen on YouTube, they're almost scared for their life and saying, is the 500 going to be a carbon copy of the Clash? Is it going to be that horrible where we just see single file racing for most of it? And if someone does try to pull out of line, will we see the entire field wreck? Now, basing it off of the 2018 Daytona 500, there were some pretty big wrecks due to pretty big movements. So I would say that that's maybe the only thing we have to worry about and brace ourselves for, but the single file aspect I don't think we need to worry about. Again, people need to realize that this was just an exhibition race. This was a 20 car field. There is no reason at all to get worried about what the 500 could look like. There's 40 cars that could be eligible to make the race. That's half of what we saw in the Clash was half of that field. So, I don't think we should bring anything from what we saw in the Clash into what the 500 will look like. And yeah, we had 3 rain delays too, so you gotta also take into consideration that the track surface changed at that entire race. The cloud cover was there. The rubber could have easily washed off, and cars could have handled way differently. So I guess the most, I don't know if you would agree with me on that, but we just need to take the Clash with a grain of salt, really, and not take it so seriously.
But the stages to rely on too.
Yeah,
in the 500, people will be fighting for stage points early on, taking advantage of some of the slower guys being able to get up towards the front at the plate tracks, probably trying to take advantage. So there'll be some shuffling around.
Mm-hmm. And
probably quite a bit earlier.
It's proof that stage racing does, make drivers, work a little bit harder at the beginning parts of the races to try to get as many points as they can. So yeah, we'll definitely see more, because the only thing that really happened in the Clash was a competition caution on lap 25-ish, I think, 30, somewhere around there. Yeah. But there wasn't really any point, again, because of all the cautions. The last point I want to touch about the Clash, the most controversial, is Jimmy Johnson's crash and win, if you want to call it that. And yeah, I don't know where to start with that one. Why don't you take us off with that, because that's an interesting incident.
Yeah, I'll start off with probably the biggest thing that stuck with me when I looked at Twitter after the Clash was over, is I seen somebody make the comment that they don't think they have seen Jimmy Johnson receive so much criticism over one event in his entire career. So something to think about, especially when you watch the post-race interviews. Johnson is a competitor just like everybody else. Some people said that he didn't want to take the blame for that wreck. I don't think it was that he didn't want to take the blame, but he's a competitor and he doesn't want to throw himself or his team under the bus. Nobody's going to want to do that, especially when there's going to be that much controversy surrounding a finish like that. So I don't think that it was necessarily that Johnson didn't take responsibility. It's just, how do you, when you get out of the car, or at least think that you won the race, until it's made official, at least. You can't just their first thought isn't going to just stand there and be like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was all my fault. I'm just a terrible driver. Like, nobody's going to stand there and say that to the media, especially when you're in Jimmy's situation. You're a 7-time champion of the sport, one of the greatest drivers in the history of the sport, stats-wise. And you had just brought a new sponsor on. Your crew's been changed around over the off season. Like, you're trying to get some momentum rolling, get everybody feeling good, get the team morale up. You're not going to sit there and dog on yourself or dog on the race just because it might not hurt Paul Menard's feelings. And it's kind of what it boils down to. And I like Paul Menard. Some people said it was Paul Menard's race to lose. I don't necessarily agree with that, because we hadn't really seen the potential of the other cars yet. I don't think anybody was really showing everything that they could do, either speed-wise or handling-wise, because everybody was just pretty content riding around. But I don't think it was a situation where he didn't take responsibility for it, because I mean, he knew that it was partially his fault. I just think that I definitely don't think it was a deliberate attempt to wreck Menard or even make contact. Something I was even talking about with a buddy yesterday during the races, how guys like Jamie McMurray and Jimmy Johnson, I think a couple others ran that Daytona half marathon in the morning. I think Jamie even said he had to get IV fluids after that was over. So I mean, you think about something simple, like maybe, although Jimmy's a phenomenal athlete and is one of the more in shape guys in the garage, is what you hear from his competitors, you never know, something like dehydration or just kind of a short mental lapse after having already done so much earlier in the day he just could have simply misjudged the move he was trying to make. I don't think he would have wrecked Menard on purpose. I don't think anybody with real common sense would say that he tried to take out the entire field to win that race.
Yeah, no one's mindset going into any race is to wreck someone else. I mean, unless you've had past history with someone else. I can't imagine past history between Jimmy Johnson and Paul Menard. You have to take in consideration that this is, you can't really say plate racing anymore. This is super speedway racing. The racing's close. The racing's fast. any slight move is, could cause a big accident. And I especially agree with your point because, we were talking about this the other night too, is that, Jimmie Johnson did run that marathon at beginning of the day. They were up since, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. I think the event started like 7 in the morning or something like that. And even looking at, because I looked at some replays of like the Fox broadcast, and Johnson looked washed out. I mean, he looked worn out after that Clash race when they were sitting on pit road, because of the rain delay. And even once they broke the news, it could have been like Johnson's reaction. He probably didn't want to get too overly excited, but he looked worn out when he said, when they called the race and that he was the winner. It's looked like, he's been through like a really long, rough day, and I think too, they were out there qualifying as well, so he had more to worry about in that. If you break apart the wreck, yes, Johnson does move up into Menard. I don't really see Menard moving that much, but was it on purpose? No. It's just racing. And that's sadly the result of super speedway racing when you're racing side by side that close. This goes back to our other point about the Clash. What's good racing? I think the single file racing honestly wasn't that bad, because the more side by side racing we had, the more I got nervous and scared that the whole field was going to wreck. Now in this case, it was just Johnson trying to pass Menard. It wasn't like a train of, 2 lines battling it out for the lead that caused the wreck. But it's just the result of super speedway racing and, trying to get aggressive with the side draft. I'm pretty sure that's all Johnson was trying to do. I'm pretty sure Johnson was just trying to get on Paul Menard's quarter panel as close as possible, but then completely misjudged where he's at in the track in relation to Paul Menard. I mean, if you think about where they're at on the track, I don't think they necessarily get into the corner, but the corner is coming up. So...
yeah, I don't know if the banking, it was starting to change right there, too. I thought that could have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
As if they kind of started to get on where the banking started to change. He just could have misjudged it. But, I mean, you look at, like, Daniel Suarez. I mean, is the main example that pops into my head. People were making the side draft work in the middle of the pack. So, I mean, it's not like it was that strange of a move for him to try, because other people were making it work here and there.
And you have to think about the run he got, because it wasn't only just Johnson that got a run. It was Kurt Busch behind him, and then I think Kyle Busch behind Kurt. I don't know what the lineup was then, but they had a huge run by, or would have been by Menard. I think it would have happened. I think Kurt kind of looked down. It seems like from his point of view, it didn't look like it was going to happen. I think maybe Kurt was going to wait till Johnson really got side by side with Menard to try to make that run happen. But, I mean, you just got to go for it. Johnson is right, too. They were racing against the rain. They all knew a heavier pocket of rain was going to come, and they all knew that could have been the end of the race, which ultimately it did. So I don't blame... I mean, I would do the same thing. I mean, I would try to go out there and pass. Anyone would have, and everyone, and yeah, I mean, you're putting blame on a 7-time champion. Everyone overlooks that fact. Everyone overlooks the fact that Johnson has won 7 championships, and, people can agree or disagree, and it's a different conversation whether or not those are legitimate championships. But in the modern era, when everything is more restricted, the rules are much tighter, Johnson still went out and won 7 championships, and people overlook that. People also overlook that Johnson struggled all of 2018, and he could have had a chance at the Roval win, but, I mean... And we joke about this with our Racing League guys on Xbox, but, might have had a miscalculation, slight miscalculation. Same thing at Daytona. It's
Nobody's perfect. Every single driver makes mistakes.
He hasn't really been up to the front of the field since, 2016, 2017? Like, 2016 for sure. Yeah. 2017, he's not as much. So, I mean, it's, Paul Menard made his comments. Johnson made his comments. The fan made all the NASCAR people, the NASCAR community, they all made their comments. But to sum this up, again, like we talked about with the racing that we've seen in the Clash, I don't think people should be so concerned about it. I mean, it wasn't a big points race. It wasn't for the championship. It's just an exhibition race. Why is the entire fan base getting so worked up over nothing? And yeah, exactly. There's so much hate for Johnson right now. Like, why? Like, I mean...
Here.
There was the Austin Dillon Almirola incident too. I guess there was a lot of hate to Austin.
People try to compare those two. It's not the same.
Exactly.
Situation.
That was completely different. It is clear that, and Austin Dillon said it himself, purposely tried to turn Almirola, which successfully happened and turned him into the wall. Johnson, on the other hand, I mean, from looking at the footage, doesn't look like he purposely tried to wreck Paul Menard. It's, again, just the result of super speedway racing. So
Jimmy did not turn right.
No,
necessarily.
No, he did not.
He just didn't quite turn far enough left. So last comment I want to make on the matter, it was a lapse of judgment. I don't think it was intentional. I do think he took the blame for it. I just think people weren't happy about the result. But we should probably go on to qualifying. Because Jimmy Johnson and the other Hendrick cars would be a fantastic segue to talk about qualifying, because Hendrick brought their speed this year. Very much so. It very much resembled Hendrick of past. I think last year, especially with the new Chevy, although they look good in speed weeks, I don't really think they had such a comfortable gap as what they had this year. I mean, Hendrick, they were just phenomenal in qualifying this year. William Byron getting his first pole, second ever youngest pole sitter for the Daytona 500 behind Chase Elliott. And not to mention that William Byron started his racing career on iRacing on a so-called computer game. So I just think it was overall, I say, if you want to argue that the Clash was a bad race, you could say prior to the Clash, Sunday was, I think, a really good day for NASCAR.
The qualifying was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not saying it. I am a Hendrick fan, but I'm not trying to be biased. I just think the storyline on its own was really good. Is that you kind of had, in my opinion, you had kind of the monsters of the sport were the ones that were battling it out on speed. Because I think overall the top three teams were probably the Hendrick cars, the Penske cars, and then you could kind of argue that Joe Gibbs and RCR were kind of right there behind Penske. So I think it was, although Hendrick had a good gap, I think kind of behind them there was pretty good competition on speed between those three teams. But like I said, I think William Byron getting the pole was just another good storyline, because people tend to underestimate sim racing, computer racing. I think that although he's in great equipment, I think William Byron showed that it's very possible to gain a lot of experience and a lot of skill from using simulators.
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
I don't think we've seen Hendrick good every time we come to Daytona. Not this good. I'm gonna go on. I'm having trouble right now on NASCAR.com trying to find time, like lap times from qualifying, but on their app they give the speed time, which like radio stations like MRN and PRN, they always go by the speed, because technically, your highest speed or whatever that you reach is ultimately your fastest lap. And I'm just going to read these times. In the second round, William Byron reached a 194.305 mile per hour speed. Alex Bowman, 194, excuse me. Wow. 194.154. Jimmy Johnson with a 193. Chase Elliott with a 193. And then you have fifth place, Daniel Hemrick with a 192, Logano 192, Truex 192. Hendrick came plowing through the field. All four of their cars, if I can count correctly, all exceeded the rest of the field by a ton, which is awesome. Yeah, it's so cool to see Hendrick back in a way. I feel like Hendrick hasn't been this strong. to make a presence like this, it's, to put all 4 of their cars up there. It's almost like when Stewart-Haas Racing put 4 of their cars out there at Talladega. I don't think they qualified 1 through 4. Maybe they did. I'm not 100% sure, but all 4 of their cars were able to just lead the pack and pull away from the pack. And I'm seeing that same exact speed out of Hendrick right here, which is awesome.
I don't think it's been quite that strong as an entire group since before the Gen 6 car.
No, not at all.
They've been competitors in the Gen 6 era, but they haven't been so dominant that they just wipe the floor with everybody else, even at the plate tracks. So.
Now, before I go on to our next topic, because, we are going to talk about qualifying and race trim because of this, I do want to point out Daniel Hendrick, who is driving the 8 car for RCR. He qualified 5th, which is, in my opinion, pretty good for an RCR car. Logano 6th, Truex in his new number 19 Toyota in 7th. Clint Bowyer is the only highest Stewart-Haas Racing car to qualify in the top 12 or whatever what was the second round? Top 16?
I think it was top 12.
It was top 12, yeah. Only car that qualified as second round, top 12. Keselowski 9, Dawson Dillon 10th, Paul Menard, 11th, Denny Hamlin 12th. So it's a good mix. It's a good mix from 5th to 12th. Below that, you got guys like Kyle Busch, Eric Jones, your next SHR driver, Kevin Harvick, in 15th. Then you have Tyler Reddick. Driving the 31 now. The numbers for RCR are so messed up. He qualified 16th. That's pretty good. Blaney, 17th, Stenhouse, 18th. Then you get to Almirola Roland Suarez, 19th and 20th. Kurt Busch, Chris Buescher, so on and so forth. But like I said, I'm reading a lot of, and you even got like Kyle Larson here at 32nd. You go to, now you're starting to go to teams that have never really qualified good at super speedways. But like I mentioned, this brings us to our next point. How far did these teams go to put their cars into quali trim or race trim? I think Hendrick for sure put their cars in quali trim. I mean, for how incredibly fast they were. I mean, I could see their cars being the best, but still, when Fox had their little, what's it called? The visual thing, like the computer generated image, or it showed the cars on track, basically quote unquote, show the cars racing each other for their qualifying times. Hendrick cars pulled away like it was nothing compared to the rest of the cars in the field. And so was Hendrick focused more on putting their cars in quali trim compared to race trim? I think for sure they were. But you look at the other teams, and I think all the other teams went to race trim because they know how, and we saw it in the Clash, how, these cars are jumping around all over the place and how handling matters. And I think a lot of these teams were keeping their cars in, a race trim that could handle, because you do have to keep in mind that, and we were talking about this last night, because we don't know who goes into the duels. William Byron definitely does not have to go into the duels Thursday night. Alex Bowman, I don't think he does for qualifying in second. I think it may be his choice to run the duels, but everyone else in the field has to run the duels. So, were all the teams really sacrificing speed so they can be good in the duels? How do you feel about that?
I don't even know where to start. The duel, because it's almost like a multi-step process, because you move from basically fully trimming out the car and qualifying, at least in Hendrick's case, to get as much straight line speed and horsepower as you can out of the car, maybe sacrificing a little bit of handling. Then you look at these cars in the duel where you have, I guess another 20 car roughly, 20 something car field, and you have things like, if I recall correctly, like Chase Elliott in 2017, 2018, I believe he won his dual races both of those years. So you have the Hendrick cars being able to transfer that qualifying speed over into the dual races. But then if you look at things like if you go all the way back to Chase Elliott's rookie season in the 24, the Hendrick cars were fast that year. Chase sat on the pole that year and literally just lost the car coming out of turn 4 in 2016 and ruined his race, spinning through the grass, total splitter out, everything. So I think it's multi-stage. I think if we have guys like, you look at Kyle Larson down, did you say 32nd, I believe you said? Mm-hmm. That's definitely, surely they're going for a handling race car, because I mean Chip Ganassi does not have back of the field, it doesn't have bottom 10 spot, like that. Their equipment is better than that. Even if you put the worst driver in the field in a Ganassi car, they could go faster. So I really think, especially as much as Kyle Larson has expressed his displeasure for plate racing over the years, I really think that there were definitely teams that knew that they were safe enough, that they knew they weren't going to go for pole, but they knew that they were safe enough just going for a better handling race car, that they could afford to lose spots in qualifying by just going for the handling of the car, doing draft practice, that sort of thing. So I'm just curious to see how it all plays out, because if Hendrick truly is strong enough to do the same thing that Stuart Haas did at Talladega in the fall, I don't think their handling is really going to matter that much if they're just all behaving and staying behind each other in a 4-car pack out in front of the field. But if we kind of go back to how it's been the last few years, where basically the cars that are the fastest in qualifying are also the biggest handful in the race, I really think it's anybody's race to win, because whoever has the best handling car, or at least who can handle their car the best, even if it is a little bit too loose, that's just, whoever can work with their car the most efficiently is going to win the race, I think, regardless of who qualified where. But I think Hendrick, whether or not they're able to kind of break out front in the out front of the field and kind of get a 4-car breakaway, or a 5 or 6-car breakaway where they're still in control, I think that's going to be the key to this race, to see whether the speed or the handling is going to be the most important factor.
And comparing this to, like we keep mentioning Talladega, where all the 4 Stuart Haas racing cars were able to go out there, we also have to go to the duels. We're not just, okay, we qualify on Sunday, next Sunday, hey, it's the Daytona 500. No, you got to go through a duel race on Thursday night. And if you can get through the duels with that car on Thursday night, that's the same car you're going to use at Daytona. Not too many teams have another backup car for Daytona. I mean, some teams do, yeah, but do you want to risk it and go to a backup car? I mean, keeping this in mind too, I found this funny because I was looking back and I was like, I didn't realize this, but Almirola's Daytona 500 car was a backup car. Guess what? Because he crashed the car in the duels. Actually, funny enough, I think Jimmy Johnson blew a tire or something, which got sent back into Almirola. So both of those cars were in a backup car for Daytona. So in Almirola's case, you seem to have a good backup car, but do you want to risk it? You put all this work practicing the day before single car qualifying, for Daytona. You go out and qualify. You set this car up for the duels, and you obviously set it up to make it, handle well for the Daytona 500. What I'm afraid of, and you mentioned it before, is Hendrick having those issues a few years back where their cars just handled horribly at Daytona once they got into the field. And I'm afraid for Hendrick again, because who knows if they're going to run into that same issue. Now, yeah, if they can do what Stuart Haas Racing did, if they can go out there and lead the race and stay up there, then they shouldn't have an issue. But once one person or all of them get mixed in with the field, are they going to feel the effects of their car? Again, they're obviously in quality trim. So, they can always change the car up during the race. They can always tighten the car up and whatnot for Daytona. But, is that going to be enough time? Will the adjustments that they make on track help them in handling for the race? I don't see that. So it's going to be interesting. Again, they put 2 of their cars in the front row, but then 2 other cars, which happens to be Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson, they're on the second row, which means they're definitely in the duels. And they'll be starting first, we think, in their respective duels, but, will they get sucked into the field? Will they feel the effects of their cars not being in race trim or handling trim? And I could just see them running into so many issues. But we'll see. I mean, yeah, it's a good story that Hendrick's up there. Will they fare well Daytona weekend? I'm not sure. I mean, they could have figured out their cars out, you know.
If I'm not the 24 or the 88, I'm nervous all week.
Yeah.
Because even if you have a fast car, anything can happen in the duels just as much as anywhere else. So,
so moving on. Yeah, really quickly. Let's talk about the duels. How they look. Now, obviously, the duels. You know, the first duel, I think, is all the odd numbered qualifying cars from single car runs on Sunday, and then duel 2 is the even car numbers. Will we see racing like the Clash?
Maybe at the beginning. I think
maybe.
What I think the duels are going to look like, I think it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be Hendrick and Penske are going to be out front, and I think that you're either going to have Chase Elliott, Jimmy Johnson, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski. I think you're going to see one of those four controlling the field in the duel. I think the duels are going to be a little more aggressive because people probably want to try to get up front and stay up front just for that security, that they don't want to be mingling around and riding around in the middle if, say, somebody does blow a tire or somebody makes a mistake and causes a wreck. You know, I think people probably would like to be as close to the front as what they could be, but I think you're going to have basically one or two cars, and I think it's going to be the Hendrick and the Penske cars are going to be out front, kind of keeping the field at bay, and you're going to have a lot of jostling for position everywhere else. I don't think any car in particular is going to struggle, at least any manufacturer as a whole. But that's just my opinion. I think the Hendrick cars and the Penske cars are going to control the duels.
And it's definitely not going to be in my opinion, it's not going to be the same as the Clash, because you're also getting cars in this field who don't have the best equipment. In the Clash, we had a very defined, all 20 cars were able to stay in the same line. I don't think the duels are going to be like that, just because, again, a lot of underfunded teams, they're going to break away from the lead pack, which means that you're going to have a smaller group of guys who are always quick every single weekend, who have the experience and have the equipment, who are going to be up there. So yeah, maybe we will see some side-by-side racing. I don't know, but I do agree they're going to get aggressive at some point or another. I mean, yeah, you want to be up there because there are a lot of guys who did not qualify that good. I mean, the biggest ones that I see, Kevin Harvick, he's 15th, so he's going to be, I don't know, he'll be close to the front. But, come the Daytona 500, you'll be starting near, again, like I said, 15. It's because the duels are based on what line you start, of the race. So yeah, you want to get out to the very front. You got guys like Almirola back there. Kurt Busch is also back there. He qualified single car runs and 21st position, so he'll probably want to get up there. I know Newman seems to have a really good car. Clash, he had a really good car, so Newman may try to want to get up there. So yeah, I see that happening too. Especially since, and I keep talking about it, if cars are running qualifying trim or race trim, these are all definitely in race trim, so I expect them to get racy because they have the handling. So, speaking of handling, I don't know if that's a good transition. Let's talk about the Mustang, because that's also new to 2019. And the biggest topic about the Mustang is the body, comparing it to what the Camaro ran into in 2018. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think we will see... first off, the Mustang is not struggling at all at Daytona and Speed Weeks. They still seem to be fast. They still seem to be dominant. But will we see the Mustang struggle come after Daytona?
I think the Mustang's probably going to be similar to how the new Toyota Camry came in. Chevy, I don't know what went wrong with them last year with the Camaro. Obviously, it was a very bad year for Chevy compared to their normal standards in their history. But you look at the Mustang, obviously it's doing pretty well for itself at Speed Week, especially with the Penske's. And it looked like, even in the Clash, the Stuart Haas cars were very racy, and they were able to make moves and, maneuver the car around. So I think the car handles well. It's definitely got the speed. But you have to, when you look at like the preseason testing in Las Vegas, I think it was Brad Keselowski was consistently one of, if not the fastest car in the group. So I think although the cars are a lot closer and some of it is draft dependent now and things like the 1.5 milers and bigger, with this new package, while it may have helped bring the cars closer together overall as a package, I don't think there's going to be any problems with the Ford. It looks fast. It looks like it handles well. I think it's going to be closer to how Toyota performed when they brought in the new Camry rather than the Chevy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm bringing this up because I brought this up to you the other night. Because, when all these new manufacturers release a car, they show the car with like their own fancy scheme on it, and then come speed weeks. Now they, have their number, and scheme on it, and unless a team shows it weeks before the Daytona 500. But one thing I want to point out is the looks of the Mustang, the body, the shape of the Mustang. When was it? Was it closer to like September? Later,
yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was late summer, early fall, if I recall.
Probably. But they released the Mustang, and I was disappointed immediately because it was the GT350 Mustang, I believe. It's definitely not the 5.0 Mustang. That's what I was thinking. Ford Performance would bring out was their 5.0 Mustang, because their teaser picture was a 5.0 Mustang. So, my thinking is, obviously they showed us something different. Well, Ford Performance released videos of them. They did a documentary talking about bringing the Mustang to the Cup level, and I'll overlay this here on the podcast, but the one clip I found was a little model of the Mustang, and it was the 5.0 Mustang. It was the 5.0 Mustang on a Cup body. And so that begs the question, did Ford see something wrong with that compared to the GT350? Now, in my opinion, looking at that model of the 5.0 Mustang and then looking at the GT350, I think the GT350 is a way more aerodynamically sound car than the than the 5.0 Mustang. Just because the 5.0 Mustang has like things that stick out closer to like where the floodlights would be and where like the radiator entrance would be. It kind of mimics.
That's very aggressive on the front.
Yeah, it kind of mimics the Fusion. It didn't have that aggressive of a body, but the floodlights kind of stuck out a little bit. But these on that 5.0 Mustang seem to stick out a ton, which I think would have caused a ton of drag. Maybe. I think it would have really hurt the car, but I just found that interesting knowing that, they did change, and they've even made smaller changes with the floodlights. They kind of make the floodlights a little bit smaller, and it just, the Mustang that people are bringing out to the track for speed weeks is nothing like the Mustang that they showed late summer. And so compared to the Camaro, which I don't think the Camaro did this, but it seems like Ford has constantly changed the look of their Mustang up till Speed Week. So it looks like they continue to work with the teams, continue to test the car to get the perfect body for the Cup car. And I think that's really good, talking about whether or not it will struggle, because the Camaro, I don't think that changed. Again, like I said, didn't change when they released it, didn't change on track at all. I don't think it's really changed this year either. It's still the same Mustang body. But it seems like Ford, really they had an awesome season, 2018. 2018, I think, was their best season in a long time. And Fox kept talking about that too. Ford was like the top out of everyone. But yeah, they're definitely continuing to change and work at these cars to make them the best. And I give credit to Ford Performance a ton for doing that. A lot of work being given into it. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, because again, it was a big topic in 2018, bringing the Camaro body, whether or not it hurt or not. I'm still not sure. I'm still on the fence between whether or not, the body really contributed to the racing, or, maybe it was the chassis or something. But we'll see. We'll see how the Mustang compares. We could probably talk about it more once we reach Atlanta and the rest of the seasons, or rest of the races, after speed weeks. So, I guess before we get into our final topic here in the Bump and Run podcast, we're going to introduce this throughout our series. We're going to call it the Bump and Run segment topics, or maybe we'll come up with a better name with that. But quick 20-second thoughts and opinions for a few topics that both of us are going to shoot out. So, Andrew, we will start with you. Your 3 topics will be the 2019 championship predictions, the Daytona 500 predictions, and thoughts on Gen 7, which we will talk about a little bit more. But go ahead and start your 2019 championship predictions.
All right, 2019, the 2 drivers I'm liking the most. One of them is extreme bias, the other is probability. First one I'm liking is Brad Keselowski. I'm really liking the way that he looked in preseason testing. I'm liking the experience that him and Paul Wolfe have together as a combination. And the second driver I'm liking is Chase Elliott, because him and Alan Gustafson were able to capitalize on opportunities and get 3 wins on a very, very bad year for Chevrolet. I think they're definitely the strongest Chevrolet in the field in 2018, and I think that once they kind of broke through and got that first win, the others followed. But I really like the way that they look if Chevy is truly back, and they'll have a stronger season overall. Daytona 500 predictions. Again, I'm really liking Brad Keselowski. I'm kind of liking Joey Logano, but I'm liking the Hendrick cars, and I'm liking kind of maybe an underdog pick. I'm liking Martin Truex Jr. because he showed pretty good speed in practice, both as an individual car, also, in drafting practice with the other Joe Gibbs cars, he looked really quick. So I think that probably the Hendrick cars, the Penske cars, and some of the Martin Truex Jr. Sorry, I started to say the Joe Gibbs cars, but probably really just Martin is the one that stands out to me the most, based on practice and kind of what we've seen in the Clash. But if I had to pick one driver for the 500, I'm probably going to go with Brad Keselowski. Thoughts on Generation 7 cars. So they said, I think it was this week, they want to get the Gen 7 on track by 2021. And people have already been doing kind of mock-up renders of the car. People are saying lower profile tires, kind of removing the splitter and going to a more traditional stock-looking front and rear bumper that's not so squared off to look more natural. I'm not really sure how this is going to work. I can maybe see people changing the bumpers on the cars slightly, but I don't see them changing the tires. I think they're going to have to still be pretty thick for kind of the way that the NASCAR is handled and the way the NASCAR's race. And I don't really think that, although people say they need to put the stock back in stock car, quote unquote, I don't really think that it's feasible to just literally go back to taking a car off of the street, putting a roll cage in it, putting a bigger engine. Like I don't think it will ever work the way that it used to way back when. So I don't know what the heck we're gonna see out of Gen 7, but I really just hope that it increases competition and brings in new manufacturers, because NASCAR supposedly is in talks with new manufacturers that are interested in coming with the next generation of car. So we don't know who that is yet. But basically, I'm just really hoping that whatever direction they take it in, I hope it makes the fans happy, and I hope it produces good racing without it being just completely artificial. Because I really think that NASCAR can use the Gen 7 as an opportunity to kind of revitalize the sport and bring a lot of the fans back. But I don't think we're truly going to go back to what some people would call a stock car by any definition.
All right, those are your 3. Here's go on.
That was way more than 20 seconds, but
yeah, it was way more than 20 seconds. I'll try to make it quick. My 2019 championship predictions, I think this is the year of the return of Kyle Busch. I wouldn't necessarily say the return of Kyle Busch, but more the redemption of Kyle Busch. Missed out. I think he had a great season alongside Kevin Harvick. And I think Kyle Busch is really hungry for that championship win. He's got to be there, especially with adding Truex to the team. That's just got to grow the Joe Gibbs camp even more. I think Kyle Busch will be one of the top picks for the 2019 championship. And I also got to put Kyle Larson there. Seems like he's always good at Homestead, but they can never put it together in the regular season. And talking about the Camaros and them being behind or whatnot, it seemed like Larson was up there with Chase Elliott as the two best Camaros in 2018. I can see them, trying to regain what they lost in 2018, and I can see Kyle Larson going at it for the championship. So I see the Kyle and Kyle show and battle happening for the 2019 championship. For Daytona 500 predictions, I think it's going to be a Mustang, and the Penske drivers seem hot. I don't think it can be the Stewart-Haas guys because they haven't seemed to be quick, but I'm putting Paul Menard up there and Brad Keselowski as potentials. I mean, Joey Logano's also up there, but there's something about Menard. I think he's strong enough to do it. I think Brad Keselowski is also strong enough to do that as well. Thoughts on Gen 7? And we'll definitely talk about this in a future podcast episode, as well as we are going to talk about the 2019 package here to end the show. But my opinion on what the Gen 7 car should look like, well, I don't think you can change much of the Gen 6, okay? People have been wanting a car to look like the street car, and there's so many people out there that say Gen 6 does not look like the street car. I think Gen 6 is the closest you can get to looking like the street car without screwing up what a stock car is. And if there are extreme issues with it, I think they should definitely simplify the sides of the car, maybe simplify the hood or something. But I feel like they need to keep the bumper. They gotta keep the bumper. They gotta keep the COT chassis. Because that's the safest. I feel like there's nothing wrong with it, but they could obviously do some more aero things to help it handle better and perform better too. Again, I do not think you can get rid of the looks of the Gen 7. I'd be so disappointed if they did, because I think Gen 6 looks phenomenal. So there are the quick bump and run segment topics, and to end the show, good segue, let's talk about the 2019 package, and I like to call this package the 2019 No Talent package. We all saw the test at Las Vegas. We all have our own thoughts and opinions on that. Andrew, like we have with all the other topics, let's start with you. Let's talk about with this 2019 package, and we'll try to bring this up, since we are ending the show time. Is it going to be an improvement from the 2018 package or the past packages that we've had with low downforce? Is higher downforce, less horsepower going to be better?
I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I'm one of the firm believers that, as far as the Gen 6 cars go, the 2014 package, in my opinion, high downforce, high horsepower, was the best racing we've seen out of these Cup cars since the new generation. Some people do like the higher horsepower, super low downforce. It's okay. I think sometimes that the racing kind of becomes a bore fest, especially when you think of looking at races like Kentucky. Kind of with the current package we have is still a decent amount of power, but less downforce, definitely the one we had like 2014. So I liked high downforce, high horsepower. Obviously, there were reasons why they changed that, but I think the fans were happy with the racing in 2014. I loved everything about the 2014 package. So I feel like with the downforce, they're going in the right direction as far as making the cars turn and making maneuverability kind of a priority so drivers can race around each other. But I feel like they have probably taken a little bit too much power out of the cars.
Yeah.
But I mean, we won't know until we get to all these tracks. No. I mean, I feel like we're not going to know for, I would say, at least a good chunk into the season, because you look at Daytona, a plate track's always going to be different. But then you go somewhere like Atlanta, and even if it's a lower horsepower package, Atlanta is just such a unique track of itself, especially with that old surface where everybody's going to be sliding around and trying different grooves anyway. But I feel like when you get to like a cookie cutter mile and a half, like I say when we get to Vegas, that's going to be kind of when we know, when we have all 40 cars out there at Las Vegas, is kind of when we're going to know what this package is going to be like. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it can be a good package, but NASCAR just needs to make sure that they can execute it properly and make sure that the cars aren't so aero dependent that there's kind of that, and people were kind of complaining about this in the preseason testing, but where there can kind of be an air bubble around the leader. Unless you have somebody kind of committing to going with you, it can be hard to get around the leader. I think if they can kind of get cars able to take advantage of runs and get around the leader and kind of the racing can be good all throughout the pack and not just stall out. I think it can be a good package as far as racing and entertainment goes, but it just needs to not be as artificial as what some people think it's going to be. And I think the fans do need to give it a proper chance on an actual track before we just throw the package completely out the window. So I'm going to say it's going to be good. I don't think it'll be as good as the 2014 package, but I think there's potential.
When I think racing, I think speed. And with them, now keep in mind that don't quote me on this. Obviously, look up articles. You know, for the podcast, I'm definitely going to do more research and stuff and look up articles and look up what people have to say. Look up Bob. Yeah, we love Bob. Bob Pockris on Twitter and now Fox Sports. But you know, I think fast and you know, at tracks 1.5 miles and lower, they're going to go to 750 horsepower. Go to tracks 1.5 miles or higher. Even that threshold could be a little bit off. They're going to go down to 550. So obviously the higher top speed tracks are going to have lower downforce. The lower speed tracks are going to have horsepower. Excuse me. Let's redo that. Higher speed tracks are going to have lower horsepower. Smaller tracks are going to have higher horsepower. So it's definitely going to bring the racing closer at higher speed tracks, and then short tracks are still going to be the same, I feel like. So in that aspect, I think short tracks are going to be maybe some of the best racing we've ever seen. I like this package because it brings the downforce and the handling. If you pay attention to the radioactives for the past 3 years or so, when they started bringing the low downforce package, I believe in like 2015-ish, 2016, all you hear in radioactive was a complaint about handling. So many drivers were just cussing and shouting, I can't handle this car, I can't drive this car. And it's not fun to race other people if you can't even drive your own car. That's maybe why the racing has been so bad, is that no one's able to race each other. Everyone's so focused about trying to survive to the end of the race and not crash their car because it handles so poorly. And so, yes, with this 2019 package, you know, we see them add much more height to the spoiler, and we see them add some splitter length as well. That will definitely bring the handling back to the car. I think kudos to NASCAR for doing that, because the cars definitely need that. However, I don't like the horsepower issue. The 550 horsepower is going to be slow. They're relying that everyone is in a constant pack to maintain the speed that a normal 750 horsepower race would give, or however many horsepower NASCAR had these cars at when they were going to bigger tracks. So they were relying on cars to be in the draft. They were relying on cars to be full throttle the entire time, and I don't think that's going to be fun. The issue we had at Las Vegas was the passing issue. And it didn't seem like people were able to pass easily, and I think that is because of the lowered horsepower. Now, if we kept it at 550 horsepower, you still have the handling. You still bring back the handling and downforce that these drivers should have, but when you increase the horsepower, you know, drivers should be able to make much clearer runs, and if they make a pass, they're guaranteed to pass that person. With this package, I feel like you need to rely on multiple cars to make a pass compared to just, let alone yourself, trying to make the pass on someone else. So yeah, and you know, I agree. I think people should give this a chance. We're basing this off of a Las Vegas test that only had 15 cars in it, okay? And Daytona Speed Weeks doesn't even have this package. They're still using the old Super Speedway package. So we're not looking at what the 2019 package looks like. So yeah, for sure we need to give, you know, this package a chance. We shouldn't assume, because every track is different. Every track has a different style, different way of driving it. You know, we could see better racing at certain tracks and maybe not so great racing at others. So, yeah, definitely have to give the 2019 package a chance. But to close the podcast off, is, I think, a topic point we're going to talk about for the rest of the season due to the package. And what is the definition of racing? What does racing really mean? And it's hard to wrap my head around the point of racing and why we do it, but part of it's just the love of cars and love of going fast. But the result of racing on the track, what should the on-track product look like? And I'll start this off because I have a pretty strong opinion about this. I see everywhere, again, on social media, people talk about the racing needs to have side-by-side, it needs to have passing, it needs to have 3 wide all over the place. But is that really what racing should be? Let's think about Formula One. Now, both of us are really huge, no, I don't know, huge, but we're Formula One fans, okay? We pay attention to it. Not the typical American, but there are a lot of Americans that do like Formula One. Formula One does not have that much pack racing. It gets pretty spread out after the first lap, to be honest, and it could be boring. But what makes Formula One exciting? Well, it's the strategies. It's what tire compound do you go on? You know, who's going to try to get the undercut, the overcut on another driver? You know, can a team pick their way back up? And I think that's what defines racing. When we look at NASCAR, yes, it's a different story because we're on ovals pretty much every single week. But should it be close every single lap? I don't think so. Look at the All-Star race in 2018. Close racing caused a huge wreck going into turn number 3 with, I think, Recky Stenhouse causing that, getting into like Truex, and then Kyle Busch and, you know, Brad Keselowski, and it took out drivers. And that's what I see out of the package, or having a package that provides way closer racing. It's just going to cause bigger wrecks, and no one wants to see, including myself, their own driver get hurt and have these accidents happen. It's just going to cause a huge mess, and I don't see the point of it. I see the point as in playing the correct strategy, being able to get your car tuned up the way the driver wants to drive their car, and for them to put all that together and, make it work on track. That's what I see racing as. I don't see racing as constant passing, constant side-by-side action. I don't think it's fun. I mean, sure, it can provide action, but it's going to result in crashes. It's going to end up in drivers getting hurt. It's going to end up in torn up cars that teams cannot pay for. A lot of these teams rely on getting through the race cleanly and using their chassis for the next race. They're trying to save money. These teams do not have money. And like I said, there's more to that, but in my opinion, no, racing should not be side by side all the time. It should, it should be, the racing, the action aspect of racing should be based on strategy. Who plays the right strategy, and who can survive and make it to the end. That's my opinion on the definition of racing. Andrew, how do you feel about that?
I was pretty much the same. I don't think that you can define racing by saying that there's always going to be constant side-by-side action entertainment. Definitely, I feel like what the fans have tried to do, or at least maybe not necessarily the fans as much as NASCAR itself, by kind of creating this package especially, they've kind of tried to mingle the definition of racing with the definition of entertainment. And the point of the sole reason, the sole definition of racing does not go hand in hand with entertainment. Sometimes it may be boring, sometimes it may be the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life. I think there's that, and then there's everything in between. But I pretty much agree with everything you said. There's nothing that really stood out to me that I would disagree with. It's just, I think that trying to artificially create entertainment and then calling it racing just isn't the way to go for NASCAR. But
yes, I understand adding downforce, but really slowing down the cars, I don't see the point of that. It should definitely be, you try to bring your fastest car out every week. That's what it used to be. These guys were hitting ridiculous speeds at, tracks, ridiculous lap times, that's definition racing, in my opinion. It should not be, trying to create it. And, again, there's a lot of factors, but we'll be sure to talk about these topics throughout the 2019 season. Again, a very big season with a new rules package for the NASCAR Cup Series. Well, Andrew, thank you for being with me here for episode 1 of the Bump and Run podcast. If you enjoyed, I encourage you guys to listen to our next episode. Next episode will be recorded after the Daytona 500. I hope everyone watches that and has an awesome week. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.